You think Peter Pan is a fairy tale about a boy who wouldn't grow up. It isn't. It is an obituary for a boy who couldn't grow up. Because he was dead. We have been reading this book wrong for 100 years. We think it's about the magic of childhood. But if you look at the man who wrote it, and the tragedy that broke him, you realize the book is actually something much darker. It is a ghost story. It is a desperate attempt to keep a dead child alive in the only place that still matters, on the page. To understand why, you have to go back to a dark bedroom in Scotland in the winter of 1867. A woman lies in bed. Her name is Margaret Ogilvy Barrie. She has stopped speaking. She has stopped eating, because her favorite son, David, is dead. He was 13, and his death has turned this house into a tomb. And then, a small figure appears in the doorway. He is 6 years old. He is drowning in clothes that are far too big for him. The sleeves hang past his fingers. The collar slides off his shoulder. They are David's clothes. The 6-year-old boy, James Matthew Barrie, has taken them from the wardrobe. He has put them on. And now he stands there, whistling the exact same tune his dead brother used to whistle. He is trying to trick his mother. He is trying to make her believe, for just 1 second, that the boy she loves is back. The mother looks up. She sees the silhouette. She asks in a broken voice, "David, is that you?" And in that moment, James realizes the terrible truth that will define his entire life. His mother doesn't want him. She wants the ghost. She wants the boy who will never grow older. And so, James decides to give her what she wants. He spends the rest of his life building a world where David never has to die. He calls it Neverland. Here is what happened. David Barrie was the golden child, bright, athletic, beloved. He was the son Margaret Ogilvy pinned her hopes to, the one she believed would become a minister, the one who carried the family's future on his shoulders. In January of 1867, the day before his 14th birthday, David went ice skating with a friend. There was an accident, a collision, a fall, the kind of ordinary catastrophe that takes only seconds and lasts forever. David died. He was 13 years and 364 days old. He would never turn 14. What followed was not simply grief, it was an erasure. Margaret Ogilvy retreated from the world entirely. She took to her bed, and the house reorganized itself around her silence. The other children, and there were many, became secondary. Background noise. The only child who mattered was the one who was gone. But here is the detail that changes everything. The seed that would grow, decades later, into one of the most famous stories ever written. Margaret found comfort, real, sustaining comfort, in one specific idea. That David would never change. He would never grow up. He would never become a complicated, disappointing, flawed adult. He would never age or struggle or fail. He was preserved, frozen, perfect. The boy she loved most was locked in amber at 13, and nothing could touch him. She said it out loud. She said it to James. She said, with something that sounded almost like relief, at least David would be a boy forever. James was 6 years old when he heard this. And something in that sentence, something in the way his mother's voice softened when she talked about the permanence of death, as if it were a gift, lodged itself so deep inside him that it never came out. It became the foundation, the bedrock, the architectural principle upon which his entire creative life would be built. Barrie wrote about this later. In his memoir of his mother, Margaret Ogilvy, he described those visits to her darkened room in devastating detail. He described entering and hearing her call David's name. He described the silence that followed when she realized it was only James. He described how he would try again, different clothes, a different whistle, a different angle in the doorway, as if repetition alone could turn him into the boy she needed. It never worked, but he never stopped trying. Now think about the story. Think about the nursery window. In Peter and Wendy, the darling children fly away to Neverland, and their mother leaves the nursery window open. Every night, without fail. It stays open through wind and weather, through hope and despair. Mrs. Darling sits beside it and waits for children who have gone somewhere she cannot follow. That window is not a plot device. That window is Margaret Ogilvy Barrie, sitting in her dark bedroom in Kirriemuir, leaving the door open for a son who would never walk through it again. The open window is the physical manifestation of a grief that refuses to close. a mother who cannot accept that no one is coming home. And the boy who flies through that window, the boy who returns to the nursery, ageless and laughing, trailing magic behind him, that is David. That has always been David. Now we can look at the book. Now that you know where it comes from, not from imagination, but from mourning, every page reads differently. Start with the name. Neverland. The Neverland. Say it slowly. It is not the magical land. It is not the adventure land. It is the land of never. The place where things that can never happen again still somehow continue. The place where the impossible is preserved. Where the gone children still play. Barrie tells us exactly who lives there. The lost boys, he writes, are children who fell out of their prams when the nurse was looking another way. If no one claims them within 7 days, they are sent to the Neverland. Children who fell, who were not caught, who were unclaimed. Barrie is describing, in the gentlest possible language, children who died, in infants lost in parks and streets, in the ordinary carelessness of the living world. Neverland is where they go. Not heaven, not hell, but a kind of in-between place where they remain exactly as they were at the moment they were lost. And Peter presides over them. He is their leader, their king, their keeper. He collects the dead children and gives them a home. He organizes their games and fights their battles and makes sure they never, ever grow up. Because growing up is the one thing that is not allowed. Barrie writes with chilling casualness that when the lost boys begin to age, Peter thins them out. He removes them. The rules of Neverland are absolute. You stay a child or you disappear. And then there is the line that stops you cold. Peter's most famous declaration. To die will be an awfully big adventure. Not a tragedy. Not an ending. An adventure. The kind of reframing that only makes sense when you're writing from a place of desperate need to believe that dying is not the worst thing that can happen to someone you love. This is not a rule invented for a story. This is the rule that governed Margaret Ogilvy's grief. The only child who was safe, the only child who was truly loved, was the one who could never change, who could never grow up and away and into something different. David's death was, in his mother's broken logic, a kind of preservation, and Peter Pan enforces that logic with the cold efficiency of a natural law. Now consider Captain Hook. Hook is the great villain of the story, but what is he, really? He is an adult in a world of children, the only figure in Neverland who ages, who fears, who carries the weight of time. And his nemesis is not Peter's sword, it is the crocodile, with a ticking clock in its belly, always approaching. Hook is terrified of that sound. He is terrified of time running out. And then there is Wendy. Look at what Peter asks her to do. He does not ask her to be his friend, his equal, his companion in adventure. He asks her to be his mother. He brings her to Neverland to tell stories to the lost boys, to tuck them in, to care for the dead children the way a mother should. Wendy is not a love interest. She is Margaret Ogilvy, the mother transplanted into the fairy tale, given a second chance to tend to the children who were lost. And when Wendy eventually chooses to leave, to grow up, to return through the window and become an adult, Peter does not understand. He cannot understand, because in this story, the one who leaves is the one who betrays. But here's what most readings miss. Hook is also obsessed with good form, with manners, propriety, the codes and rituals of the adult world. He is everything that Peter is not, complicated, self-aware, burdened by consciousness. He is, in other words, a grown-up. Hook is J.M. Barrie. He is the version of Barrie that did grow up. The brother who survived, who aged, who became an adult in a world that his mother had reserved for the dead. And Peter, David, the eternal boy, defeats him. Every time. Because in the economy of this story, in the economy of Margaret Ogilvy's love, the dead child always wins. The living child, the aging child, the one who grew up and grew complicated and grew away, that child is the villain. That child is the one the crocodile is coming for. Barrie understood this. He understood it in his bones. He never grew past 5'3", as if his own biology were trying to keep him small, trying to keep him young, trying to keep him closer to the boy he was when David died. In his mother's story, the hero was the one who was gone, and the one who remained, the one who put on the clothes, who learned the whistle, who spent a lifetime performing the role of the dead, was only ever the understudy. The ghost of Peter Pan did not stay in the pages of the book. It reached out, it touched real children, and it did not let them go. In the late 1890s, Barrie befriended Sylvia and Arthur Llewelyn Davies and their 5 sons: George, Jack, Peter, Michael, and Nico. He became enchanted by them, playing in Kensington Gardens, inventing elaborate games of pirates and fairies, and weaving their personalities into the mythology of Peter Pan. The character took his name from one of them. The adventures grew from their games. They were the living material from which he built his monument to the dead. Arthur died young. Sylvia followed not long after, taken by illness. Barrie became the boys' guardian, a devoted, suffocating, sorrowful presence, who loved them with an intensity none of them fully understood. And the story he had built around them gave them something else, a kind of fame that felt less like a gift and more like a sentence. George, the eldest, was killed in the First World War. He was 21 years old, cut down in the trenches of Flanders, one of a million young men whose futures were swallowed by mud and artillery. The boy who had played pirates in a London garden was gone. Michael, whom many believe was the truest inspiration for Peter Pan, the one Barrie loved most fiercely, was lost at Oxford. He drowned in 1921 alongside a close friend, in circumstances that were never fully explained. He was 20 years old. The water keeps its secrets, and the grief that followed was bottomless. Barrie was devastated in a way that those close to him said he never recovered from. Michael's death was, in a sense, the death of David all over again. The golden boy, taken too soon, leaving those who loved him to sit in the dark and wait. And then Peter, the one who carried the name. Peter Llewelyn Davies spent his adult life trying to outrun the shadow of the character. He called it that terrible masterpiece. He burned Barrie's letters. He flinched when strangers recognized the name. But the story was faster than he was. In 1960, his life ended in tragedy. He was 63, and the boy whose name had become synonymous with eternal youth was gone. The irony is so precise, it feels designed. A story about a boy who cannot die, surrounded in the real world by boys who died too young. A fairy tale about permanence written by a man whose life was defined by loss. The ghost of Peter Pan did not protect the Llewelyn Davies boys. It haunted them. It marked them. And it could not save a single one from the thing it was built to deny. So what is Peter Pan? It is not an adventure. It is not a celebration of childhood. It is not about the joy of never growing up. It is a way of keeping the dead alive. It is a 6-year-old boy standing in a dark doorway in his dead brother's clothes, learning the most terrible lesson a child can learn, that the surest way to be loved is to never change. That the safest version of a person is the one who is already gone. That the living are always a disappointment, because the living insist on growing, aging, becoming something other than what they were. Barrie spent his entire life trapped in that doorway. He never fully grew up, and he never fully remained a child. He existed on the threshold, or the nursery window, the border between the living and the dead. And he wrote a story that lived there too. A story that was, at its heart, a love letter to a brother he could never replace, and a plea to a mother who could never love him quite enough. The open window stays open. Mrs. Darling never closes it, because closing it would mean admitting that the children are not coming back, and Barrie could not write that ending. He could not bring himself to shut the window on David, to let the cold air in, to accept that the room would stay empty. So he left it open, and he filled the sky with a flying boy, a laughing, crowing, impossible boy who would never age, never change, never disappoint. A boy made of starlight and grief and the desperate hope of a mother who could not let go. Peter Pan is the only way J.M. Barrie could be loved by his mother. Not as James, the small, quiet, living son who stood in the wrong doorway, wearing the wrong clothes, but as David, as the ghost, as the boy who was perfect because he was permanent, who was loved because he was lost, who flew because the alternative was to lie still on the ice and never move again. And that is what we are really doing when we read this story. We are not escaping into a fantasy. We are sitting beside J.M. Barrie in that dark bedroom in Scotland, helping him keep a promise he made when he was 6 years old, that David would never be forgotten, that someone, somewhere, would always leave the window open, Peter Pan is the boy who wouldn't grow up, because he couldn't.